Well, we have two important confessions tonight, two historic confessions about the Trumpian madness that consumes millions of people in this country. One of the confessions is by a Trump supporter who confessed to attempting to kidnap and possibly murder the Speaker of the House and to actually attempting to murder the Speaker's husband. We have another confession from another Trump supporter who has not yet committed the crime he has confessed to, the crime that he has confessed he is planning to commit. Here is that confession.
Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin after I'm elected governor.
You just heard Trump supporter Tim Michels say Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin after I'm elected governor. He did not know he was being recorded at that campaign event. That's the Republican candidate for governor in the state of Wisconsin, where the polls say the Republican candidate is tied now with Democratic Governor Tony Evers, who's running for re-election. The Republican is campaigning for governor of Wisconsin by telling his supporters that he will end democracy in Wisconsin. End it.
Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin after I'm elected governor.
That means if the Republican is elected governor in Wisconsin, he will deliver Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes for president to Republicans, no matter what. He is promising that the next presidential election will not be fair, and he is promising that no election in the state of Wisconsin will ever be fair again if he is elected governor. That is what is at stake in this election. To say that Republicans, like the Republican candidate for governor in Wisconsin, do not believe in democracy is to understate their feelings. They are actively opposed to democracy. They are enemies of democracy. They are trying to kill democracy.
Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin after I'm elected governor.
Now, his press people are claiming that he simply meant that he will do such a great job as the Republican governor of the state that voters will only want Republicans in office, in all offices in Wisconsin for the rest of their lives. That's their defense for that statement. But that same candidate, that very same candidate, has promised that he will decertify the 2020 presidential election result in Wisconsin, which gave Wisconsin's electoral votes to President Biden. That is his word, decertify. Now, there is no such process, but that is how much of an enemy of democracy the Republican candidate for governor in Wisconsin is, and that is why Donald Trump so fully and energetically supports his candidacy. We have the confession of a Republican candidate for governor planning to kill democracy at the same time that we have more details of the confession of the Trump supporter who tried to kill Nancy Pelosi's husband, just as he would have tried to kill Speaker Pelosi if she had been home when he broke into her San Francisco home. Today, Donald Trump added more lying poison to the cognitive systems of his followers, whose cognition is already overloaded with Donald Trump's lying poison. Donald Trump appeared on a podcast today where he said that there were, quote, weird things going on in that household for the last couple of weeks. Those are his exact words. Now, Donald Trump is obviously just making that up. He has no idea what has ever been going on in Nancy Pelosi's household at any point in her life. But Donald Trump knows that most Trump supporters have no ability left to separate fact from fiction, none, and that he can therefore say anything to them. Donald Trump was speaking on that podcast to the kind of Trump supporter who broke into Nancy Pelosi's home and confessed to police that he was on a suicide mission. Donald Trump, in the same podcast, said, quote, the glass, it seems, was broken from the inside to the out, so it wasn't a break-in, it was a breakout. Now, that lie by Donald Trump provoked San Francisco's police chief tonight to publicly repeat on television that it was a break-in. The man who committed the break-in has confessed that it was a break-in. Millions of Trump supporters are much smarter than Donald Trump and know that it was a break-in. But most Trump supporters are not smarter than Donald Trump. Like the Trump supporter who was arraigned in state court today in San Francisco on charges of attempted murder filed by San Francisco District Attorney Brooke Jenkins. In outlining the charges against 42-year-old David DePape, the district attorney added new details to the confession that San Francisco police obtained from David DePape and information police obtained from Paul Pelosi. Mr. Pelosi, quote, asked defendant why he waited to see or talk to Nancy. Well, she's number 2 in line for the presidency, right? When Mr. Pelosi agreed, defendant responded that they are all corrupt and we've got to take them all out. When Mr. Pelosi asked if he could call anyone for defendant, defendant ominously responded that it was the end of the road for Mr. Pelosi. Mr. Pelosi grabbed his phone, turned it on, called 911, and put the phone on speaker. Watching Mr. Pelosi, defendant stood about 3 feet away, still holding the large hammer and the zip ties. During the 911 call itself, Mr. Pelosi said that there was a gentleman there waiting for his wife, Nancy Pelosi, to come back. To defuse the situation, Mr. Pelosi told the dispatcher that he did not need police, fire, or medical assistance, trying to be calm and discreet while also trying to help dispatch to understand the situation. Mr. Pelosi then asked for the Capitol Police because they are usually at the house protecting his wife. The dispatcher then asked Mr. Pelosi if he knew the man, and Mr. Pelosi said he did not. The dispatcher then asked for the man's name, and the man responded, "My name is David." When the dispatcher asked who David is, Mr. Pelosi said, "I don't know." But David said, "I'm a friend of theirs." Mr. Pelosi then confirmed with the dispatcher that he did not know the man. After the 911 call ended, David DePape said he wanted to go downstairs to get his backpack. They proceeded downstairs with defendant walking behind Mr. Pelosi, still holding the large hammer and the zip ties. Turning on the lights, Mr. Pelosi could see where defendant entered the house. Defendant commented that he had to bash the window several times to break through and enter. Defendant also said that the police would be there any minute. Mr. Pelosi tried to calm defendant by saying that they would not, but defendant responded, "I can take you out." When the doorbell rang, defendant directed Mr. Pelosi not to open the door, but Mr. Pelosi opened the door with his left hand. As the door opened, the two men stood in the dimly lit foyer facing the officers. Mr. Pelosi nervously but calmly greeted them. When the officers asked what was going on, defendant smiled and said, "Everything's good," and pulled his hands toward his body. When an officer turned on his flashlight, defendant could be seen holding the bottom handle of the hammer with one hand and Mr. Pelosi's right arm with the other. Mr. Pelosi had his hand on the top of the handle near the hammer itself. One officer ordered, "Drop the hammer." At the same time, defendant raised the hammer and said, "Nope." Defendant tried to pull the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi, which twisted Mr. Pelosi's arm back. Simultaneously, Mr. Pelosi pleaded, "Hey, hey, hey." The officer asked again, "What is going on here?" But Mr. Pelosi could not maintain his grip on the hammer. A second later, defendant wrenched the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi, immediately stepped back and lunged at Mr. Pelosi, striking Mr. Pelosi in the head at full force with the hammer, which knocked Mr. Pelosi unconscious. The officers rushed into the house, tackled defendant, and disarmed him. Mr. Pelosi remained unresponsive for about 3 minutes. Waking up in a pool of his own blood. The police say that DePape showed them exactly where he had broken into the house. The police did not ask him questions, but he did spontaneously make statements. "I'm sick of the insane effing level of lies coming out of Washington, D.C. I came here to have a little chat with his wife." Defendant added, "I didn't really want to hurt him, but, you know, this was a suicide mission. I'm not going to stand here and do nothing, even if it costs me my life. Hurting him was not my goal. I told him before I attacked him that he's escalating things, and I will go through him if I have to. A highly experienced public defender named Adam Lipson has been assigned to this case. His constitutional duty is to represent the legal interests of his client, and we should all be grateful that he is doing that, because the system of jurisprudence could not work without dedicated defense counsel. Adam Lipson knows that his client has confessed to the federal and state crimes he is now charged with. Adam Lipson said that he is concerned about his client's, quote, vulnerability to misinformation. Vulnerability to misinformation. How many future criminal defendants are out there tonight whose vulnerability to misinformation has them believing the lies Donald Trump is telling about the attempted murder at Nancy Pelosi's home, which would have been an attempted assassination of Nancy Pelosi if she had been at home? Listen carefully now to what this public defender had to say today after the arraignment, and keep in mind that Adam Lipson may be a constituent of Nancy Pelosi's, or may have been in the past. He may have voted for her, possibly many times. And notice that he had the basic human decency to begin his comments, unlike Donald Trump and so many Republicans, with a full expression of sympathy for the victim in this case, Paul Pelosi.
Good afternoon. I'll make a brief statement. My name's Adam Lipson. I'm a deputy public defender who was just appointed on this case. I first of all want to say that I'm pleased to hear that Mr. Pelosi is progressing well in his recovery, and we certainly wish him the best. As you've heard, there's been we have very little information about this case at this time. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumor, simply based on the nature of this case. But as of right now, I haven't even seen the police reports. I met my client last night for a brief meeting for the first time. And so I'm not going to add to all the speculation by talking about the facts of this case right now. What I will say is that there's also been a lot of speculation regarding Mr. DePape's vulnerability to misinformation, and that's certainly something that we're going to look into, that we're going to delve into as his defense team. But again, it would be premature to talk about that at this time. I just want to end by saying I've been a public defender for 20 years. I cherish my role as a public defender. As most of you know, we represent people who cannot afford to hire a lawyer. I look forward to representing Mr. DePape, to providing a vigorous defense for him, and to getting to an equitable and just resolution of this matter.